Near day on Birds 365. Jody McDonald, John McMullen, neither one of us went to West for you. But we got a couple of Mountaineer guests joining us. A little later, Kevin Kincaid of Crossing Broad, a proud WVU grad, and our own West Virginia guy. He looks like a West Virginia guy with that stuff all over his face. Looks like
he's grinding like the Eagles coaches. No time to shave. Although Gannon and Steichen better shave for their virtual interviews. They better shave.
Very true. Mike Gill joined us here on Birds 365. You shaving today or not?
You'll appreciate both these guys. I haven't shaved in years. Now, I'll trim, but the genesis of this facial hair, probably 6 years ago, I was Kevin Owens for Halloween.
Oh, nice.
And I had to keep, I had to grow. And then my girlfriend liked it. In fact, this is I had met somebody for an opportunity and I shaved when I met that person. And she said, never do that again.
Well, the women always win. Yes.
So here we are. Facial hair.
What they want goes.
Yeah, I see my man Kincaid.
Baby. Yeah. Well, I wanted both of you guys because you're both kind of the same as me. You can't figure out what the hell's going on with this fan base and their hatred of Jonathan Gannon. And I was on your show, 97.3 ESPN South Jersey, down the shore, 2 to 6 every weekday, Mike Gill. And I gave you credit, and I've stolen it since.
How'd that go for you?
It's going well. I thought you had a good explanation. They don't really hate Jonathan Gannon as much as they hate the modern game, and they don't sort of realize, every fan base is provincial. They pay attention to their team. They don't pay attention to what's going on in the rest of the league, and they don't understand how defense is played. And when you have the second-ranked defense in the NFL, other measurables, but they're top 10 in all of them, whether you want to look at the advanced stats, whatever. That's pretty good. And a lot of fans just don't realize and don't turn on other games and see the issues other teams are having.
And if they do turn into other games, I'm not trying to say that nobody watches others. They're not watching it with the same critique they are when they're watching their own team. We played an audio clip. Sal Powell was on with me back in like week 12, and he brought this up. At that time, there had been 102 less touchdown passes in the league. Like, scoring is way down. And one of the reasons scoring is so down is 102 less touchdown passes. And that was even more of a eye-opener to what we're talking about, John. These defensive coordinators are just saying, you are not throwing the ball over the top on us. So if you're going to score, you are going to have to grind it out. You're going to have to drive down the field. You're going to have to go on 9, 10, 11 play drives, which usually will result in either, hey, we hold you to a field goal and you just went 11 plays and only got 3 points. That's a win for us, defense. You threw an interception. You got sacked. You got a penalty. If you're asking the offense to go on multiple 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 play drives, that generally doesn't work out too well for them, as evidenced from the Eagles season. You might not like what you're watching, but they don't give up any points. They're 7th in points this year.
Yeah.
But I thought that number, 102 less touchdown passes, lended credence to my thought, and I didn't pull that stat out. My producer found it for me. He said, hey, Sal Powell said this, which kind of goes to what you told John McMullen the other day. And I said, that's really interesting that the defense around the leagues are just saying, you are not going to get 30, 40, 50-yard bombs on us. And that's what you're seeing throughout the league right now.
First of all, the 102 less touchdown passes this year compared to
2 years ago.
2 years? Okay, so it was 2 years ago. So it is something that can change over time, and I think it's a very good stat, and a telling stat at that. Here's the one thing that if you're an Eagle, if you are like John and myself, all three of us are kind of on the same page here, that if you think Jonathan Gannon takes too much, from the Eagle universe in general, Here's worst case scenario, and I hate to be this guy, but I feel the need to do so. Giants beat the Vikings this week, and the Giants come back into Lincoln Financial Field next week, and the Giants with Blitzen Wink Martindale gets 5 sacks, and the non-blitzing Jonathan Gannon only comes up with 1 sack, and one of those 5 Giant sacks is a strip sack that ends up as a big turnover. Oh, you will hear from Eagle Nation en masse.
Yeah, that's true.
What do you mean?
That is very true.
The NFL has changed. Bullshit. Look at what Wink Martindale does. He still brings the house. The Giants are a dancing winner. I'm telling you, you better hope that doesn't happen, Johnny Mac.
You're right.
Oh, well, I mean,
look, you and Sal Powell and anybody else who said, "Oh, it's you guys aren't paying attention. The league has changed."
Well, there's still
right, even Nation is not going to listen to that.
I hear what you're saying, Jody, and you're absolutely right. But that scenario unfolds. You're absolutely right. I'm going to be taking a lot of crap, as are a lot of other people. Doesn't change the fact that what we're saying is true, though. I mean, the league as a whole, Wink is an outlier. Mm-hmm. Wink is an outlier. And by the way, whatever the Giants are, 24th ranked defense, they give up big plays all over the place. They gave up a big play to A.J. Brown on the blitz last week. All over the place.
Twice. Yeah. The 2 plays the Eagles had where them blitzing, Hurts looking right at it and saying, here you go, 50-50 ball. I'm going to win that more than half the time. I'll take it. I mean,
and they're going to give up big plays. They got Justin Jefferson to deal with this week. They might win the game, but they're going to give up a bunch of big plays. I guarantee you that with Kirk Cousins.
Well, look, in the end, it's people bring up a lot of different numbers that make their narrative feel good. And someone said, well, they give up 80% completion. First off, last year, John Gannon's defense gave up a ridiculous amount of high percentage passing. Yeah. They didn't have the talent last year. Now with the talent upgraded, they're not giving up 80% passing. They did it, one game to Dak Prescott a couple weeks ago, and we conveniently leave out in that game, no Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, no Avonte Maddox. Those 2 guys are a big factor of why this defense works. Communication is a big deal. You look at Minnesota, runs the same defense, and they stink.
I say it all the time. Communication. The Eagles run this. It all started with Patrick Mahomes. No, I shouldn't say that. It started with Sean McVay because Sean was, the guy, the offensive guy in the NFL. And he wanted to bring in somebody who ran Vic Fangio's defense, and it turned out to be Brandon Staley. And he said, that's the toughest defense to deal with. So everybody follows Sean McVay, everybody. And they say, oh, that's the toughest defense to deal with. And then when you remember, was it last year or 2 years ago, Mahomes had that little stretch at the beginning of the season where he was struggling a little bit, and everybody was just playing cover two, and he was trying to force the football. And then he kind of figured it out and went back to being Patrick Mahomes. So it was a very short stretch, but everybody looked at that as well and said, all right, this is the way you got to play. You got to, as you said, Mike, you got to force them to go down the field methodically. And I'll be the first to say, it's no fun. Jody's heard me say this. I don't like this scheme. I hate this scheme. It's no fun to watch. It's not aesthetically pleasing, but that's why I love your description, Mike. You don't like the modern game, which I'm with you, but don't bring up Buddy Ryan and Jim Johnson and Bud Carson. It has no relevance.
Well, listen, in the end, Buddy Ryan didn't win one playoff game. Jim Johnson left us frustrated because they couldn't win a playoff game when it mattered the most. Joe Jaravicious, hello. And Bud Carson's teams didn't win squadaddle either. I mean, you had great coordinators who blitzed the quarterback and knocked him to the ground and was aggressive all the time. None of those teams won anything. Jim Schwartz, who people hated, won the Super Bowl. Now, they won the Super Bowl on a night where their defense got lambasted. But in the end, much like John Gannon's defense, percentages, it's a lot of numbers, analytics, which fans don't like. But in the end, John Gannon is banking on my defensive line is going to get to you in the spot that I need it the most. Brandon Graham got the biggest play in history. The previous quarter and a half of that, 3 quarters and a half of that game, that defense was horrible. But when they needed the big play, they knew they could count on it. And that's similar to what this defense is. They will get the big sack or the big interception or the big play. That's what they're banking on. And for half the season, before these injuries started to kind of cloud the defense up, it was working. That's what the defense was set to do. Pressure the quarterback with 4, get interceptions, get sacks, get strip sack, get fumbles, and it was working. Well, you take a couple pieces out, and yes, it should be looked at differently, but you get those guys back, you're hoping that the percentages come back into play in your favor.
And by the way, I want to throw this out, and I give Ruben Frank, our buddy from NBC Sports Philadelphia. So Ruben is the stat guy, or maybe our own Jeff Kerr. And I didn't know this, so I want to give Ruben credit. Jonathan Gannon has more top 10 defenses in 2 years than Buddy Ryan had in 5 years with Reggie White, Jerome Brown, Seth Joyner, our own Seth Joyner, Andre Waters, Wes Hopkins, Eric Allen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. More top 10 defenses, 2 in 2 years than Buddy Ryan, the great Buddy Ryan, with Reggie White and company had in 5 seasons. These people are nuts. And I'm not talking about everybody, but these people that crap on John, they're nuts. They are certifiable.
I didn't know that. The 5 years Buddy was here, he only had one top 10 defense.
That's what Rube said. I trust Rube. I haven't looked it up.
That comes as a surprise. All right, I got a question for Mike Gill, because I think you did a good job explaining what the Eagles defense changed from last year to this year. They had the games where quarterbacks were certainly completing 75%, if not 80% of their passes. And some bad efforts last year. Guys just threw underneath and took advantage and moved the ball down the field and said, oh, yeah, and we're going to stick it in the end zone, not just settle for field goals. Last year, Slay was here and Maddox was here. There's been one major change at the corner position, and that's James Bradberry.
Big change.
How big is it that they re-sign him? He's a free agent at the end of the year. Yeah. Most people speculating, he's going to get paid. He's coming off this great statistical year, 3rd-ranked cornerback in all of football, passer rating against. How much are the Eagles going to have to pony up to get Bradberry to stay?
Jody, it's a big question. They got a lot of guys on that defense that they're going to have this question, but Bradberry may be, last year, if you watched them play, you just mentioned their secondary, Slay, Maddox. Now, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, I think, is a big factor because he makes the big play. He covers that middle of the field so that he comes up with that interception. That's where Blankenship, he makes the play. He doesn't cost you the game, but he's not helping you win the game either. Bradberry, though, changes the conception for me. If you watch them on the All-22 last year, you had Steve Nelson playing in Jersey half the time. They just didn't want anybody to run past him because he just couldn't run. Bradberry changes the complexion of the defense because he's so much better than Nelson is. And, quite frankly, you could make an argument that he's been the best corner on the field. Even Slay, I thought, played much better the first half of the year than he has recently here. Oh, yeah. But because they don't have to play Nelson so far off the ball, that's where they were getting crushed in these games last year. People say, hey, look at Nelson playing in Camden. Let's just go right after him. And they had so many completions in front of Nelson, and the team would just say, let them catch the ball, we'll make the tackle, and, move on from there. The problem was every single game they're doing that. Here, Bradberry is way more equipped. So looking at what's down the road for them, if he leaves, there hasn't been anybody, McPherson, anybody that you're like, okay, the next, if they let Kaiser White walk, we're all under assumption that Nakobe Dean steps into that spot and moves on. If they let Fletcher Cox walk, all right, well, Jordan Davis will get more snaps. I don't know what they do in the event that either Chauncey Gardner-Johnson or James Bradberry move on, because Blankenship is a solid player. He's not Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and doing what he's doing back there. Again, he's not costing you games, but he's also not helping you win games. I liked your joke yesterday, John. Gardner-Johnson and Dak Prescott, what they have in common. To have to lead the league in interceptions on defense and miss 6 games is unbelievable. That shows you how big of a playmaker he is and what he means to this defense. Those two guys have been huge additions, Bradberry and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson.
Yeah, and they're not going to be able to keep everybody. And that's why the sense of urgency is here. I mean, the window's open. You got to take advantage of this. And I would say, but that's one of the good things Howie Roseman has done with this offseason. They have 2 first-round picks. So you look at that number 10 overall pick, and Jody and I were discussing it a little bit yesterday. I haven't done much draft prep, but, my first thought would be they're going to take a corner at number 10. They wanted to take a corner a couple years ago, and all of a sudden J.C. Horn comes off the board. They loved him. He's turned into a great player. They love Patrick Surtain. He comes off the board. He's turned into a great player. And they ultimately shifted gears and got Devontae Smith, who has turned out to be a very good player as well. So, but they've been looking at corner for a number of years. Ultimately, I think they're going to go. Yeah, that's the thing, man. When you got to pay the quarterback and that bill's coming, then you got to start building the roster a different way. And you got to get these young players on cost-effective deals. And that's why you got to hit on draft picks. And the Eagles are set up at least with 2 first-round picks. I don't know how they keep Bradberry. I mean, he's just played so well. Somebody's going to give him the bag, as they call it.
Yeah.
And the Eagles are not going to be able to keep him.
No, and he's an important part of why this defense is different from last year. If you ask the question, Jody, what's different? Nelson and Bradberry are a huge difference. Yeah. Nelson is the guy who's just safe, a solid tackler, not even a great tackler, but just get off the ball, catch in front. Bradberry's making plays. He's breaking passes up. He's a part of why teams hesitate to use that side of the field. And I think Maddox being in that slot and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, when those 2 went out, it has kind of coincided with, this team's not getting the same amount of turnovers. The interceptions aren't there. And the middle of the field has become a problem because the slot guy and the safety guy are a big part in communication with the linebacker on defending the middle of that field. And you're seeing some breakdowns in that spot.
All right, Mike Gill, we know that if the Vikings beat the Giants, which we don't know that's going to happen, but if that's the way that it plays out, and assuming Seattle doesn't upset San Francisco, the winner of the Bucs and the Cowboys is going to be the Eagles' next opponent. You got a preference as far as who you would like to see against the Eagles, who the Eagles, quote unquote, match up better with, have a better chance to get to that NFC Championship game against?
I mean, I rank them as the Giants would be my first choice. Yes. Seattle would be my second choice. Tampa would be my third choice, and Dallas is last. Listen, I get it. Eagle fans like to hate Dallas. When they're playing their best, of those 4 teams, they're the best. I mean, when they're playing their best football, they're the best of those 4. And quite frankly, if you're asking to play Dallas, it's because you want that game more than you want that opponent. You can't sit here and tell me you think that playing Dallas gives you your best shot. Now, do I think you're going to be an underdog against Dallas? No, you'll probably be a favorite, but a small favorite in that game. And if they play their best football, which you never know what you're getting from them. You could get the 40-3 Minnesota Dallas team, or you can get the team that laid an egg against Washington. I don't want to take my chances with that. What I saw from Tampa over a 17-game slate is less consistency. And that's what it's about in the NFL. When you play your best, what can you be on that Sunday? And if you play your worst, what can you be on that Sunday? But how many times can you get to, a couple of years ago, the Eagles, I think it was 2019, they had played a game against Miami, who was horrible that year, and the Dolphins beat them. And everybody, you lost to the Dolphins. This is an embarrassment. And then the Eagles won their next 4 games and made the playoffs that year. So at their low point, they lost to a horrible Dolphins team. But earlier in that year, they had beat Green Bay pretty handily on a Thursday night and just thrashed them. So that was your ceiling. Your ceiling was, if I play my best, I can play like that. When Dallas plays their best, they are clearly the best of these 4 teams.
Oh, yeah.
They would be last on the list of teams that you would want to see in that divisional round. It would make the best conversation on Birds 365 for the week. Although that Tom Brady guy coming
Tom
here,
Brady, Tom Brady.
All right, but let me hop in here because I disagree with you. We're talking about playoffs, right? This game that they play to it will be a playoff game. Is there a derivation between regular season and the playoffs? Because the Dallas Cowboys, with the players they have on the roster right now, the coach who coached elsewhere and won a Super Bowl and Diddley in Dallas, taking all of it into consideration, and then there's that Brady guy on the other side. How much do you have to take that into consideration? Who had the better season this year? 17 games as compared to 17 games. Dallas Cowboys had a better season than Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I agree with you. But you're looking at Dak Prescott, whose playoff history record is what it is, and Tom Brady, whose playoff record history is what it is.
Fair.
That doesn't sway you enough?
It does. No, it's fair.
I'd rather avoid that Brady guy. Hold on. Let me turn the clock back 12 months ago. Oh, Tom Brady stuck his finger in the Eagle's eye and laughed doing so. You'd rather face Brady than Dak Prescott in the postseason, huh?
When you say it like that, it makes you sound ridiculous. But especially if Tampa wins the game. Now they have won a game, and, but that being said, they're just not the same team. I think up front, they're a problem. Their offensive line has been now they're going to get Jensen back, likely. I think that's a pretty big addition for them to get him back at center. Their defense, see, this is why I think Dallas, last year when Dallas got stuck playing San Francisco, that was, to me, the worst spot for them because San Francisco is a physical defense who can kind of stand toe-to-toe with them. Tampa Bay's defense isn't their problem per se. Look, they played this game already. Tampa kicked their ass earlier this year. That game wasn't a fair fight. Their defense kicked Dallas's ass all over that field, knocked Dak out of that game, if we remember. They
got hurt.
3 points in the game against Tampa. So Tampa's defense still can ratchet it up. Their problem has been they can't protect the quarterback. The receivers play has been – now Evans has been great recently, but they had a lot of drops this year. Godwin hasn't been the same. Obviously, Gronk's not there anymore. They can't run the ball a lick. They've run the ball better the second half. To say you want to play Brady is preposterous, but they have more question marks around that roster, and that's –
I think, you bring up Jensen people in Philadelphia are worried, is there going to be too much rust with Jalen Hurts because he missed a couple weeks? I mean, Ryan Jensen's been out for the whole stinking season. He's not going to show up and be Ryan Jensen like you typically. I mean, people kind of fit into the narrative, but we all do it, and I do it too. But I'm not playing. It's not Tom Brady against Dak Prescott. It's the Buccaneers versus the Cowboys. I'd rather play the Buccaneers than the Cowboys.
Right. With Jensen, it might not be his performance. It might not be Jensen's performance as much as if you watch them play, they have so many communication breakdowns on that offensive line that gets them in trouble. And you just wonder if he making calls will help them.
He'll help them. He'll help them. But I just mean, the guy hasn't played the majority of the year. I wouldn't expect him to be his typical Ryan Jensen level. But I mean, look, if it were just quarterback versus quarterback, Aaron Rodgers would have 10 rings and Patrick Mahomes would be on, 4 and counting. It's not. It's not. It never has been. Even with Tom Brady, who was the outlier in the greatest of all time. He doesn't win every year. How many years are we at with Tom Brady? How many years? 21? I said this about Michael Jordan. We're in the 20s. All right, he's got 7 rings, which is astonishing, but he loses that last game a heck of a lot more than he wins that last game. I think people forget that. I really do.
Oh, but come on, John, be fair. You got to compare winning percentage of championships against everybody else. If Tom Brady's winning percentage of the only thing that matters is winning the last game, how does his percentage compare to every other quarterback on the planet?
I just said he was the outlier, but you got to be fair and say it's not Tom Brady or Dak Prescott. There are other people on the field. This drives me insane. I mean, the reason Tom doesn't have 9 Super Bowls is because there were other people on the field in the Giants' front in both of those Super Bowl wins dominated the football game. It wasn't Eli Manning. It wasn't the helmet catch that helped. It was the Giants' defensive front speeding Brady up, getting him off his spots, why they won both of those Super Bowls.
Right. But to take it back to what you
9.
just said about the only thing that matters is the last game of the season. How have all those other players fared for New England since Brady decided to leave? How many last games of the season have they won?
Jody,
0.
they
made the playoffs once in time in 3 years and they lost. They got crushed by the Bills. So all those other players who contributed to those championships haven't won squat toss since Brady took his act to Tampa.
I think I called him I know I called him the outlier. People hear what they want to hear. I called him the outlier. He's the greatest quarterback of all time. I said that. He still loses his last game more than he wins his last game. That's my point. Even the greatest of all time, even Michael Jordan, you can throw Bill Russell out of the conversation because I think he won it more than he lost it. But very rarely, the greatest of all time, as good as they are, they still lose more than they win. So I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, because Tom Brady at 45, by the way, and he's not the Tom Brady at 35. And, even though it's amazing at the level he plays, he's not the same player. I'm not going to say I don't want to play the Bucs versus the Cowboys because the Cowboys are more talented. That's all I'm saying. They have many better players. And Mike brought it up. Mike, you said it perfectly. If they play their A game, they got a chance to beat you. If Tampa Bay plays their A game, you still got to play crappy to lose to that team. If you're the Philadelphia Eagles this year, that's the difference.
And I'm going to point to the Cowboys.
Still be a little worried. Still, if they beat Dallas, you still that. Of course, that will heighten the worriness.
Well, I get it. And by the way, if he gets the football with 2 minutes left, and the Bucs are down 3, oh yeah. You should be very worried.
The thing with Tampa that is so mind-boggling of why they were so bad is, they still have a lot of talent from that Super Bowl team on that offensive side of the ball with Godwin and Evans and Fournette. And Fournette was a big part of that run that they had. And then, of course, you have Brady. And you're thinking, why can't this team score? What is their problem on offense with the weapons that they have? And then you would see them come in here, and then the John Gannon fans would have a field day because Brady would just be nickel and diming up and down the field.
Yeah.
Can I ask both you two guys who, you are holding Dallas in higher esteem than I am right now. What the hell happened to Washington last week? The division was still up for grabs. The Eagles could have lost. We know, we watched the game. They could have lost that game. It wasn't like they ran out to a 28-0 lead and then just kept adding to it. So Dallas didn't know when the game started. And oh, by the way, they got beat from the time the game started. It wasn't like, oh, my God, Washington came out of nowhere, got 2 late touchdowns. Washington got the better of the play throughout the entire game. Where was that talented Dallas roster last week in a game that they should have been very motivated to win?
I don't know how motivated they were to win that game. I think they thought it was a fait accompli that once New York started Davis Webb, that their fate was kind of sealed. But, Jody, to your point, Dallas can have low lows. That's the thing. But when they play their high level of best game is better than the Tampa high.
What are we using as a basis to believe they're going to do a high this week in the postseason?
I didn't say that. We're rating the potential.
I'm not asking you, John. I'm asking Mike because Mike just said when they play their high.
Oh, I don't know that's coming.
What are you leaning their high being this week on?
I don't know that that's happening. I will say this. If I'm Dallas, I am petrified of this game. This would be a game I would not want to play if I were them. I would have much rather had to play Minnesota or Seattle or somebody else. San Francisco I'm not asking for. But if I'm Dallas, I've already got my ass kicked once by Tampa. I don't need to go down there again as a favorite on the road, mind you. Now you're the favorite as the road team here. People are saying, you better win this game. I don't envy them at all in this position. Why? Because of what we're talking about, Jody. I don't know if I'm getting their high or if I'm going to get the Dallas that we see all the time here. All I'm saying is if they win this game and play their best next week in Philadelphia, I think they have the best shot at when they play their best at beating you. The other teams, if they play their best, I think Philadelphia just has flat out more talent than Minnesota, Seattle. You can't play Minnesota next week, but the other group of teams.
Right.
I think Dallas has the most. I think Philly's got a better roster than Dallas, but they are the most comparable level of talent of the 4 teams that you could play next week.
Yeah, that's where we started this discussion, was of the 4 potential opponents, who would you least likely play? To me, the Eagles are going to beat all 4. It's not a matter of, but to me, there's a clear delineation between Dallas, and I don't care, because I don't care about the other 3. Now, if you force me to pick, I would say, yeah, Tampa would be the next on the list, the next least likely. And I would, then go Seattle if I were forced to rank them, then the Giants, who I think the Eagles would beat, as I said, 99 out of 100 times. That's what kind of a mismatch I think that game would be. So amongst those 4 teams, that's it. It doesn't mean I think the Cowboys are going to come in here and beat the Eagles. I still think the Eagles are going to win the game. Of those 4 potential opponents, though, it's Dallas, and I don't give a flying, the other 3 teams stink.
The last thing I want to see is my WVU boy Geno Smith coming in here, hitting DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and turning around and giving it to Kenneth Walker all day. That's an interesting offense, by the way.
Well, I always say you can talk yourself into anything in the NFL. Everybody has good players, trust me. So it's San Francisco, Seattle. That's a mismatch. But there are people in San Francisco right now talking themselves into what you just said, Mike.
It was a close game a couple weeks ago, 21-17, I think.
Geno Smith throwing it, Kenneth Walker, tremendous talent. There are people, trust me, I know people in Minneapolis. I know a lot of people. There we go. How are you going to beat the Giants? How are you going to beat the Giants? How are you going to beat the Giants? They have Kayvon Thibodeau and Daniel Jones is playing well. You have freaking Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson and Danielle Hunter. Show up and play the game, and you're going to win the game. Same thing with as we're talking about Dallas being fearful of going into Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is not a playoff team. Tampa Bay won the NFC South because somebody had to win the NFC South. But all NFL teams have really good players. So the time between games in the NFL, it plays with people's minds. They talk themselves into things.
That's
and they
true.
Say, oh, this is good. This is good. Every NFL team has good players.
All right. Last thing, and then we're going to let Mr. Mountaineer Mike Gill run. Both of you guys are for my mind, quasi-journalists. John's certainly more of a journalist than
that hurt.
Me and Mike, because we're YouTube/radio guys, and it's more opinion based than fact based. And John does a great job of putting his opinion into his writings, but he holds himself to a slightly higher journalistic standard. I have mine, and I think, Mike, you have yours. But they're not right along par with guys who have to write for a living. So putting your journalistic aside, and just me asking you guys as individuals who would like to see the Eagles win next week in their first playoff game, if you have to root for it, you're telling me you're rooting for Tampa to beat Dallas this week because they're an easier matchup against the Eagles the week after.
I think so. I think that's yes. I think I would prefer Tampa to have to come here and play rather than face Dallas.
Yeah, I mean,
if you're telling me what's the easier path, I think that would be it.
I mean, it's tough for me because I don't, root for the Eagles. So if I were a fan, I would root for Tampa Bay to beat Dallas. If I just wait, let me clarify that, because Mike brought up the point. A lot of Eagles fans just want to see Dallas and beat Dallas because that's the Yanks. If your only goal is to win the game, If your only goal is to win the game, again, I'd rather play the Giants first, Seattle, Tampa Bay, Dallas last. But you should win all 4.
Right. And I think we all agree on that. The Eagles will be favored in any of the matchup they have in the next round.
That's true.
All I'm saying is don't tug on Superman's cape. You're disrespect. Both of you are disrespecting the GOAT. And I'm not doing it. I tried. Last year was so much friggin' worse with Eagle fans. Bring on Tom Brady. We want Tom Brady. And I tried to talk him off the ledge. No, you don't.
But last year was different because Tampa Bay was better than the Eagles.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just saying, I got a lot of that last year on my radio shows. We want Brady. Nick Foles abused Tom Brady. You don't want Tom Brady. You just leave it at that. You'd prefer not that Tom Brady. Now, if the Bucs win and they're coming here, I'm going to pick the Eagles over the Bucs. I'm not going to say they can't beat Tom Brady, but Tom Brady or the Cowboys, I don't want any part of Tom Brady. Mike Gill, great job. Always a pleasure, buddy. We appreciate it. We'll look forward to talking to you again next week. Have a nice bye weekend.
All right, guys. Enjoyed it.
Mike
Thanks,
Gill
Mike.
from 93.7, the Sports Bash down the shore, ESPN Radio. McMullen and McDonald hanging with you. Our next WVU guy, Kevin Kincaid across the board, is going to jump in less than